Okay, 2007, Away from Her, directed by Sarah Polley. She's also responsible for the screenplay, and we've got the lead stars: Gordon Pinsett, Julie Christie, Michael Murphy, Olympia Dukakis, Kristen Thompson, and Wendy Crewson. And let's try and get some sort of information. This is a very harrowing tale about the tremendous impact that Alzheimer's has on principally the family of the person with the disease. Fiona, played by Christie, starts to lose her memory, and her husband Grant, played by Pinsett, watches her slip away, and we follow this steady sort of slipping away throughout the film. And as I say, it's a rather harrowing tale. The incidents that happen, initially quite amusing, like putting a frying pan in the freezer, and then slowly, as a result of her aging, she starts to forget more significant information, mundane maybe, but eventually Fiona goes to live in a rest home, and this is when the relationship between her and her husband all but disappears, really, in her mind, and we focus on the harrowing realization that the person that you once loved has no memory of you whatsoever, and we also meet other people with disabilities. For example, Aubry, played by Murphy, is wheelchair bound, and he is visited by his wife Marion, played by Dukakis. This is a sort of supporting a subplot of the Polley. His previous work has included, when she was in independent cinema, Go, and The Sweet Hereafter, where she joined up with Atom Egoyan. And on this particular project, Egoyan serves as executive producer. Alice Munro's short story, The Bear Came Over the Mountain, is brought to the screen. Okay, can't see anything else. Rather poor review. The opening frames, we see Grant in his car. He's got a note, possibly to remember things. And then we cut to a picture of Julie Christie as a young woman, possibly around the time of movie Darling. And Grant is describing those early moments after meeting her and his desire for her, and which leading to their marriage. It puts it into the context of where this story begins. We see the pair of them in a wintry scene where they're on skis. Maybe it's a retreat, a winter retreat, and then to the house, and the first obvious scenario where Grant notices something's wrong as Fiona puts the frying pan in the fridge. Polly captures memories that Grant is recalling back when there was still a relationship of sorts before the condition deteriorated to the point where he was a complete stranger, and he captures these memories in the here and now. At a dinner party, which appears quite normal really, Fiona suggests that she get another bottle of wine, but she can't read the words, or she can't recall how the word wine, which is on the bottle, the label on the bottle, she can't recall how the sound of the word occurs, and she's sort of almost trying to read it for the first time in her life, like you would as a very young child, grappling with the task of reading skills. After a visit for up-to-date assessment on the deterioration in her memory recall, when they drive home, she asks her husband how long they've been in the current premises, 1 or 2 years, and he then informs her that it's when he was at university some 20 years ago. Another perspective on her memory loss. Grant, we see going to visit Marion, played by Dukakis. Her husband Aubry is in the same facility as Fiona, and she's of the view that he's come to talk about Fiona's making a pass at her wheelchair-bound husband, which is not why he's there at all. Eventually she agrees to let Grant in. Fiona and Grant obtain books that analyse what happens when the disease takes a grip, and things are spelled out very clearly as to what the spouse has to put up with. It's quite tough to swallow to hear about what's up the road in the future. Okay, so from my notes here, Christie received a nomination for Best Actress Oscar, and Polly for Best Adapted Screenplay. Neither of them won, however. So let's get on to it. Fiona, out wandering in the snow, takes it upon herself to remove her skis and fall into the snow on her back and gaze up at the sky, and time passes such that her husband witnesses dusk appearing, and she hasn't moved for hours, and he has to go and rescue her. Well, he assumes he's got to rescue her, but then he can't find her. and she's been walking on the main road. When Grant goes to this centre for care centre, whilst he's being shown round by the warden or the matron or the manager, whatever term you want to use, no stones left unturned with regard to giving you, the viewer, a first-hand look at the type of disabilities, mentally, alzheimers, physical ailments, real cross-section of folk whose lives are sort of drifted into chaos. The rules outlined by the warden: once admitted, 30 days, no contact with family. Grant finds difficulty in accepting this, and later, with Fiona, he tells her about them. She seems quite amenable to the idea, but he's not impressed. Then we see them embraced, dancing, with the sound of Harvest Mood by Neil Young as part of the score. Don't know whether that's very appropriate, but as Grant drives Fiona to the care home, Fiona reminds him, as part of his career as a lecturer, she reminds him of his keenness to become friendly with the female students, and she goes through describing this with an element of sort of hostility and anger at his alleged flights, fancy, his desire for other women, and her reaction to this of tolerance and bearing. It's quite interesting as she's now being separated from him. As a parting gift, so to speak, Fiona tells Grant that she wants to make love before he leaves. Interesting. Grant's departure is heart-wrenching. He seeks out a member of staff, trying to convince himself that her memory recall of a place that they visited a year ago could suggest that she's not suffering from the disease. The staff reassures, but then she receives a note from his wife telling him to go. But it's all very painful. When Grant goes back after the month, she doesn't appear to remember him, although they converse and she talks about long-term memory. She doesn't acknowledge him as to who he is. She thinks he's a new resident, that it's his first day. She's trying to be friendly, but hasn't clicked as to who he is. Must be shattering for him. And on the second visit, she's oblivious again and has become attached to Aubry, and Aubry shows a certain sign of jealousy when she goes to talk to Grant, and he's playing cards and he drops his cards, and Fiona seems to be caught up with his situation and leaves Grant to deal with him. It's almost like he's lost her to another man. It's painful, to say the least. Finally, Grant gets to talk with Fiona, but it's not as a husband and wife, because she has no concept of that. But what comes out is that her preference for Aubry, because his state of mind is somewhat limited. She says that she isn't confused with him, implying that she is confused with Grant. We get a glimpse of raw emotion. Grant can't cope when he sees Fiona showing an infinite amount of care for Aubry, and he's receiving no attention. He regresses to childlike behaviour, demanding that she recognise the fact that he's the husband 45 years, and Fiona reacts in a sort of frightened way because she doesn't see him like that. It's quite earth-shattering. Another visit. Grant from a distance, observing Fiona with Aubry. He then engages in some conversation with a young girl who's obviously come to see, possibly with her mother or father, to see her relative, and they get a rapport going when Grant explains that he's giving his wife space to relate and react and be with Aubry. This impacts the young girl. His next visit, however, is told by another member of the staff that she's sick. She's not there, and nor is Aubry. We learn that Aubry isn't permanent, so he's due back with his wife. His wife and Grant have met, of course, and she shares his circumstance and her predicament financially. She couldn't afford him to be in there. She ended up having to sell their house to pay for his care. But the implication of him coming back is that he's not at the care home with Fiona, so Grant goes to visit her. Grant starts reading this book on Iceland to Fiona. Her family history traces back to Iceland. But what's remarkable when we listen to Grant reading is the camera's on Fiona constantly, and the non-verbal acting is terrific. She's clearly upset at Aubry's departure, and that's a vivid memory in her Alzheimer's brain, but her acting is wonderful. Aubry's departure has led to Fiona's depression. She's losing faith in continuing to be mobile. Her will is seeping away, and she's getting near to the point where she has to be reclassified to a part of the facility which is really more sickness. Grant then asks for the address for Aubry. He sees this is the way of preventing Grant and the worker getting involved, embroiled in a chat about the ups and downs of life and the skeletons in the cupboard. And the worker's quite forthright, having seen Grant as the sort of do-gooder husband, perfect. She sort of hints quite strongly that he's probably got some skeletons, and that's why his wife may well show some frustration towards him. She is a one-parent family, so she's carrying that baggage around. Invites Grant to a dance via her answer phone as they are losing their respective husband and wife. Their need to get rid of this loneliness is bringing them together. After Grant makes love with Marion, he then gets her to agree to reunite Aubry with Fiona, now that Fiona's moved to the second floor. The second floor is where they've basically lost it all. He then arranges to bring Aubry, and with Aubry outside in the wheelchair, he goes in, tries to prepare the groundwork, but Fiona's forgotten all about Aubry. What was quite fascinating watching away from her was the notion of likes attracting likes. The dementia victims, Fiona and Aubry, attracted to each other. Alright, they were in the same building, but their faults and their shortfalls highlighted the dependency that Aubry would seek from Fiona, and then outside the respective partners of the two, Marion and Grant, being attracted to each other. This deep-seated need for attention and love, even in the face of situations that are quite tragic. I think that's what I got from the movie, apart from the in detail aspects to dementia as seen through the acts and words of Fiona, played by Juiie Christie. So a very, very, very good movie.